For over 30 years, the team at Hope Store New Beginning Center, along with our clients and community partners, have been building lives without violence in Dallas and Collin counties. If you're in immediate physical danger, please call 911. If you need shelter or would like to talk to someone about receiving our other free services, please call our 24-hour hotline at 972-276-0057 in English or Spanish. At Hope Store New Beginning Center, we offer free trauma-informed services for those affected by domestic abuse, battering intervention and prevention services for those who have abused their partners in the past, and free community education services for any community group or organization. Domestic abuse is a human rights issue that affects a third of all Texans. We empower victims, perpetrators, and community members to live in safety and foster healthy relationships. Please call our 24-hour hotline for help or visit hdmbc.org to learn more about our services. And don't forget to follow us on social media. Hope Store New Beginning Center, building lives without violence.
So welcome. This is the webinar that I usually do with, it's kind of an odd mix, this one. We're going to be talking about teen relationships today, and a lot of it's going to be anecdotal, stories based on my experience through going through the different school districts around the DFW area and interacting with thousands of teens over the years. And so I'll be sharing with you parts of the actual slideshow and presentation that I do with the teens, but I'll actually also be able to layer on top some commentary about my experience with their reactions and their participation and their answers. So hopefully, I'm not sure if anyone has any kids that's with you to watch this. If you do, that's great. It's not going to be a problem. And I encourage parents to watch with their teens for our future webinars as well. So moving forward here, my name's Ryan Thomas. If we've not met yet, I'm the Community Education Program Manager at Hope Store New Beginning Center. And as you can see there, my job used to be to go out into the community. And so I find that I'm really missing my people with the pandemic and the shelter in place and the social distancing. As far as today's webinar goes, there's always the plan, and then there's, what happens. And so a lot of times I really love the interactivity and encourage participation, which is not so easy to do via Zoom or webinar. Especially for me, even as a participant, I'm like, you can't see me, I'm not going to be participating. But if there is participation, that's great, but it does sometimes slow down the pace, which I think is okay if that's what you guys are interested in. So as far as the plan goes today, we'll just talk a little bit about Zoom. I'll talk a little bit about Hope Store New Beginning Center and our free services. I always tell people that if you forget everything I talked about today and the only thing you remember is that this weird bald guy works for a place that helps people for free, then I'll consider my time well spent today. We'll talk a little bit about teens and what's going on and kind of how they feel about relationships. We'll also go into kind of how teen dating abuse works, definitions, characteristics, and forms of abuse. We'll play a game called Cute or Creepy that I played with the students. I was going to say kids. I think I might say kids, children, teens, students throughout. That's really fun and actually informative, and it's interesting to hear what their answers are. And oftentimes adults and parents are surprised to hear their answers. And then we'll talk a little bit about ways that you might be able to help a teen out, or at least build a relationship to where, should they run into any problems or perhaps need to seek out help or services, that they are much more likely to reach out to you if you've already established that trust and built that relationship. I think finally after that, nap time is in order. So if that's okay with everyone, just a reminder, questions are welcome at any time. Feel free to jump in, unmute yourself, raise your hand in the chat. I'll try to be good about checking that. The Q&A and the chat's enabled. I believe I set it to where you can actually upvote or comment on other people's, and then there'll be a little survey at the end there. I can talk more about Hope Store New Beginning Center services in detail towards the end, but I'll just give a little summary about our mission. Hope Store New Beginning Center, we seek to provide intervention services to those who've been affected by abuse, and then also prevention services so that hopefully we can prevent the abuse and the violence from happening in the first place. And one way we do that is through our educational programs, of which you are a part right now. And this, empowers our community with information and tools and tips on how we can respond to the human rights crisis that we are living through, along with the pandemic and civil unrest as well. So intervention and prevention, what does that look like? Ideally, I'd like to think about ourselves as shooting for the goal, and this is our bullseye every time, is for everyone to live in safety and have healthy relationships in our community. When people hear about Hope Store New Beginning Center, or I tell them that I work for a domestic violence agency, of course, naturally, people most often think about the victims. And of course, this is how Hope Store and New Beginning Center got started, was by providing volunteer services for victims. But of course, if we only address the victims and offer help and support and empower victims, then we're not holding the offenders accountable. And many times we know that these offenders are serial offenders, and if their victim leaves or becomes a survivor who has escaped that abusive relationship, many times they'll just go find a new victim. We also know that abuse is a learned behavior, and so it's also really critical that we don't ignore the youth, because if we don't do education work and with the goal to prevent them from needing our victim services or our battering intervention and prevention services for offenders, then we won't be able to eradicate the violence. And so the community education program is where we go into schools and talk to anywhere from middle school, high school, or college kids, and discuss teen dating abuse and what we can do to educate them in a way that they can understand it, so that they can recognize it and then respond to it appropriately. And our victim services. So we do have our 24-hour hotline. It's answered in English and Spanish 24 hours a day. Everyone's encouraged to call there to begin seeking any of our services, which include our emergency shelters. We have 2 for a total of 44 beds. We have our counseling department, play therapy for children, individual and group therapy for adults as well. We have our amazing legal team that can help give free legal advice to our clients or discuss things like divorce or child custody. We also have a transitional housing team that can help our clients when they come out of the shelter get into a place, and we can help them with the rent and deposit so that they can save money and be on a transition to being able to live self-sufficiently and in safety. Lastly, each of our clients also gets a case manager. I always like to show pictures of our shelter. These are actual pictures of our shelter in Garland, with the playground and the comfy beds and the garden. And of course, this is because most importantly, we want to not re-traumatize our clients and make them feel as safe and comfortable as possible. Second, we do have that battering intervention and prevention program for our offenders. It's not therapy, it's a psychoeducational group class. It's 24 weeks in a row, and offenders must pay to take our BIP class, and that's because by law they have to show part of their financial accountability. And in the battering intervention and prevention program, they really learn to question their previously held beliefs that they used to justify the abuse in the first place, and practice healthy relationship skills. Many times that our BIP clients are referred to us by a judge or CPS. Lastly, for our community education, we do the prevention education in schools. We train and educate adults. We also do outreach events, resource fairs and conferences and things like that. So what do teens want to talk about? I asked a question, I started asking the question, at Lake Highlands High School last year, I started to implement a program called Safe Dates, where I went into 6 health classes at Lake Highlands on Mondays for 10 Mondays in a row. And so before I began, I wanted to ask the students, what do you guys want to talk about? I mean, I'm going to be here for 10 weeks, and we're going to talk about things like dating and relationships and gender and abuse. What do you guys want to learn about? And I think the answers were pretty surprising, and that maybe you'll find them too. So this is the question I asked using this whole EV software, so that we could all see their answers, and this is the report that came up. I think this was over 35 responses. So in the next 10 weeks, what would you like to know, learn about, or discuss? So the top answer, and then 6 other people upvoted it. So they liked this question, they agreed with it. So how to talk to a girl and have healthy relationships without being shy. Right, I mean, wow, okay. Can I have more candy was the second most popular question. I believe I was passing out candy in order to bribe them into participating. How to find a gamer girl. Okay. How to keep a conversation alive is the next most popular. How to get rid of your feelings for someone. How to be a good listener. Do you believe that teenagers want to learn how to be a good listener? I think my point, and what surprised me about this, is that they're kind of innocent yet mature at the same time. I think there was one class, somebody said something about they wanted to learn how to put on a condominium, but really, you know, a lot of the answers were pretty innocent. How not to make a girl mad. I mean, this is probably the best question ever, and if I knew that answer, well, probably be a lot happier and not make so many girls mad. So I'm not the one to answer that. But I like this one at the bottom. Is being overprotective in a relationship good or bad? And when I hear words like that, those are red flags for controlling and possessive behavior. Parents are protective, but boyfriends, girlfriend, dating partners are not. I always say, who are you protecting your girlfriend or boyfriend from? Lions, terrorists? No, you're being controlling. So how to tell someone you like them, avoid heartbreak, I'm shy. I mean, so this is what's going on in the teens' minds today when you ask a very provocative question about sex and gender and abuse and relationships. You know, so I think, you know, we don't have, we have a lot of reason to be hopeful and have a lot of faith in this next generation. So anyway, there you go. What I usually do is when I start out these presentations, I'll ask everyone in the audience, and it may be 30 kids or it may be 400 in an auditorium, but I ask them, how many of you guys are in a relationship? And, you know, hands go up. And then I say, well, how many of you guys are not in a relationship? You're single. Hands go up. And so what do you guys think? My webinar participants here, do you think that more teens are in relationships or are single, right? Oh, I did get a question here from Mabel. Are you going to share your contact info? Yes, I will be sharing my contact info, absolutely. So what's always surprising to me is that most of the kids are single. And then I think I asked them the follow-up question, of you who are single, how many of you guys are glad that you're single? You're happy that you're single? And that's when all of the hands go up, and very forcefully and strongly. And it always surprises me. And I tell them this because, you know, when I was their age, you know, 17 years old in high school, first of all, I had hair. And I like to show them this picture. Well, yeah, just simply because it's proof that I did have hair one time. But more importantly, when I was their age, that's all I thought about was girls and having fun, you know? And so if I wasn't in a relationship, I was trying to get into one. And if I was trying to keep her around. So it's really surprising to learn that most kids today don't want to be in relationships. and they're glad that they're single. And I think there is um, reason to be interested in why that is, right? And I think, one thing is that we, growing up, and even us as adults, we're socialized. We get a lot of inputs and influences from our environment, and a lot of things that we can't control in peer groups and family and institutions and things like this. And the teens these days are being socialized in a much different way than you and I were. Yet some things never change. And so I like to start out because it is very important, I think, and the research shows that we address this idea of rigid gender stereotypes that teens hold. And since they are young, and because abuse is a learned behavior, and relationship skills can also be learned, we can actually change their socialization and influence them in a positive way. So as an example, I like to ask the women in the audience who identify as female to remember back when you were in kindergarten or first grade and you're on the playground and you're sitting in the gravel, and maybe there's a little boy in the corner of the playground, and maybe he's throwing pebbles at you or pulling on your hair or teasing you, right? What did that mean? What did we all learn that meant when a boy teases a little girl? That he liked you, right? Yeah, everybody knows that, and it never fails. Wherever I am, everyone always yells that out. And so the question, of course, is why? Who taught us that? Why do we believe that? And is that true? And if we think about it, that's a really weird message to give to young girls, right? The message being, or the implication being, that if a boy mistreats you, well, lucky you, right? Being mistreated is a sign of affection. And so what we see happening in teen relationships is this takes the form of, I'm just being protective of you, right? Or my jealousy is an expression of how much I love you. And so the more jealous I am, means that I'm just that much more in love with you. But of course, that's not true, and that's a really wrong message to give to young ladies. And similarly for boys growing up, if you're like me and you thought it would be cool to take football in as a freshman in high school, and then you got tackled once and quit. The coach probably said that I played like a what, right? And so girls probably are a wuss, right? Some of the comments, or worse, right? And the implication being there that, girls are worse. Girls are not as good as boys. In fact, it's an insult to compare you to a girl. And I submit that that's a very wrong message to give to young boys, right? From a young age, we are taught to devalue women. And of course, the more rigidly that we cling to these rigid gender stereotypes about what a real man is supposed to do or a real woman, the more likely we are to experience abuse in our relationships. And the opposite is true as well. The more likely we are to see the genders as having equal value, and there not being these rigid gender stereotypes, the more healthy our relationships tend to be. And so we can affect this in teens, right? We kind of address the real man, or the man box, or the male masculine, toxic masculinity, I believe is what they call it. I think we will watch this video and then move on to some more exploration of what dating abuse is, and then get into our cute and creepy game. So hopefully you guys can hear and see the video. If you can't, please message me in the chat. All right, so if you've seen that before, I apologize. I've seen it quite a few times, and I still find value in it. I think what's really important about that video is, I think what's interesting about it is to try to figure out what was the point of producing that video, and did they get that point across, or did they actually kind of undermine it? usually I'll ask, what were your reactions, impressions? And usually I get like one of our attendees said, bravo, you know, and it's, oh, it's great, it's beautiful, it restored my faith in humanity, and everything's going to be, you know, rainbows and unicorns. But and I thought that too, after the first moment that I saw it, but then I started to think a little more deeply about what I saw, and some things concerned me, and certainly there was evidence of socialization in the boy's behavior. Um, you know, was there anything that you guys were concerned about or didn't like? You know, in the interest of time and expediency, I'm going to move forward a little faster here, but you know, what about when they touched her on the face without asking. But you know, if we go to the beginning of the video, the boys, they wanted to be firefighters and pizza makers, and because they like to make messes and help people, and it's this very kind of innocent. I think we can see the innocence of children, that they just want to be helpful and have a good life, right? Um, then they asked, what do you guys like about this girl? And all of their answers were about her appearance, or how pretty she was, or her hair, or her shoes. One boy didn't even answer what he liked about her. His answer was, I want to be your boyfriend. He just went right there, right? So they're objectifying her. And then did they get consent to touch her, right? They didn't, and you could tell even some of the boys were extremely uncomfortable doing it. And so I think we have to ask, if they were uncomfortable, why did they do it anyway, right? And I think the answer is because they were told to. They had this kind of permission, or at least tacitly, tacit approval from this man, this producer, that told them to, right? So it was almost like, you know, well, he told me to, he's a man. And at the same time, though, they didn't slap her when told to, right? And when asked why, they said, most of them said something to the effect of, she's a girl. One of them even said it's because she's pretty, right? So it begs the question, what if she wasn't pretty, or they didn't find her pretty, or if it wasn't a girl, right? And so why do we hear this so many times out of males in society, that men don't hit women, boys don't hit girls? Well, it's because they've been told this. Oh, we've been told this over and over and over, just like on the playground, right? So my point is that we need to start, and this is what the research says, explicitly telling children from a young age, not boys don't hit girls, but, you know, humans don't hit humans, you know, period. And if anyone mistreats you, it's not okay, and you have the right to establish a boundary and say no, and then report it if it happens again. And so we really have a lot of power. And so many times we think, well, kids know this. Kids know not to be bullied. They've been told be respectful their whole lives. We don't need to say things like that, but actually we do. And this video is evidence of it, because they will say what they hear. So I'm going to skip past this video here and go into our teen dating abuse section here. So we know that teen dating abuse is as prevalent as it is among adults. In Texas, 1 in 3 adult Texans will experience violence from a partner. And then nationwide, the studies say 1 in 3 teenagers will experience abuse from a dating partner. And so in a classroom of 30 kids, that's 10 of them, right? And then so that means there's another 10 who are the abusers. So in every classroom of 30, 20 of them will either experience abuse as a perpetrator or a victim, and that's simply not okay. Another shocking study asks teenage girls, and what do you guys think? For every 10 teenage girls who are physically abused by their partner, how many will continue to date that person? How many will not break up? And the answer, almost always the teens get right. 8 out of 10, 80% will choose to stay with that abusive partner. It's very counterintuitive, but the same is true of adults as well. We know that adults will often leave their partner 7 to 10 times and go back 7 to 10 times before finally leaving for good. So the question is then, why do people stay, right? And of course, the teens are indignant that they just cannot understand why somebody would put up with that. because it's not happening to them. The data says that actually 80% of them would. So why? And the teens are really good at picking out these reasons. The one most often overlooked, though, is the second one, love. Um, we tend to forget that most victims love their abuser, right? And that's because it's not always bad times. There are those good, amazing times, intertwined within those bad ones, and especially in the beginning, sometimes it's almost too good to be true. But if you combine complex human emotions like love and fear, and then you throw in like peer pressure and the social embarrassment, and then maybe growing up in a household where it becomes normalized, and so you don't expect anything different, or that person promises to change, or maybe they threaten suicide. We know that 20% of high school girls who were dating a boy reported that their boyfriend told them at some point that if you leave me or break up with me, I'm going to either hurt myself or kill myself. And so it's not so easy to just leave. In fact, it's not so easy to talk about it either. 2/3 of teens never tell anybody about the abuse, even their own best friend. Um, so it's important for us to realize as adults that it is happening in our communities, right? And it doesn't matter how old or young somebody is. In Texas, in the past 3 years, the youngest girls murdered by a dating partner were 14, 15, and 16 years old, right? And the oldest were in their 80s and 90s. And so we know that teen dating abuse can affect all teens, even those in our schools, our families, our churches, and our communities. It's also important to remember that it's never the victim's fault. And so, abusive behavior is intentional and it's a choice, because that person, they oftentimes feel entitled, that they have the right to have power and control over another individual. So, we'll talk here in a minute about some things that we might want to avoid saying, to avoid even implying that the victim may be somehow responsible for that. So what we know about dating abuse is that it's a series of pattern behaviors that happens over time. In other words, right, it may start out as something like teasing, or be framed as teasing, or maybe playing too rough, or an insult that then the abuser may respond, well, I was just joking, just playing, or don't be so sensitive, and try to play it off, and then over time can become that verbal abuse or emotional abuse, trying to make someone feel stupid, ugly, worthless, and lazy. And then it may evolve into other forms of coercion and control, like using technology or actual physical force. So all these behaviors are coercive. They're designed to get the other person to do what I want as the abuser, because I am entitled to be in control. We know it's a choice. And it's not about losing one's temper, because we know that people who abuse, they don't beat up their boss, they don't beat up the cop, they don't beat up anyone else in society that makes them angry. So that's evidence that they can indeed control their temper. We also know it's a learned behavior. This is a game that I play with, sorry, just looking at the clock here. It's 2:36. Does anyone have any questions before we move on? Am I talking too fast, too slow? Hopefully y'all are still connected and I'm not just talking to an empty blank screen. So this game is called Cute or Creepy, and I love playing this game, and I think it's a really fun game that we can play with teens. It's really fun to play it in an auditorium with hundreds of teens screaming out cute or creepy. So Cute or Creepy goes like this. It's very simple. I'm gonna show something on the screen, and then you either yell out cute if you think it's cute and you like it, or creepy if you don't. And so it's pretty evident here which one is cute or creepy. Obviously the one on the left is the creepy one because they're too young, and the one on the right is the cute one because, I mean, look how committed she is, right? We're never breaking up. I mean, that's loyalty. I like that. So for this game, this exercise, I want everyone to imagine that you have a boo, you got a bae, you got a dating partner, and maybe you're a high school kid, and So I'm going to give you a situation, and I want you to imagine that if your boo, your bae, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, whatever, your dating partner did this, how would it make you feel? Would it make you feel, oh, that's really cute, you like it, it's a sign of affection, you want them to keep doing it, or creepy, no, that crossed the boundary, don't do that. Okay, so I usually start out with something simple and neutral, like your boyfriend or girlfriend wants to sit next to you at lunch. Okay, so everybody in your mind just yell out cute or creepy. Cute or creepy. Most people say cute, and then I'll say, oh, what about every day? What if they want to sit next to you every day at lunch? And then here's where some people still say cute, and then some change to creepy, and some people are just indignant that, of course, that's creepy. And some people will say, well, I mean, why not? How about your boyfriend or girlfriend tells you that they love you? You guys like that at your age, being teenagers, right? Well, what if they tell you that the first week of going out? Does that change your perception of that statement? Right? I'm loving the comments here. Right, so then, of course, when is it okay? And I get a variety of answer, 1 year, a month, or whenever you guys both feel that it's mutual, which is probably my favorite answer. What if your boyfriend or girlfriend like tells you need a haircut? That I know I don't need a haircut, but I'm just want you to look good, or how about you get a mohawk, or whatever. And in fact, here's some money. Here's $100. Go get your hair done. I think you look really good. Come back and show me. And there are a group of people who are adamant that this is as cute as it gets because they're giving me money, right? But surprisingly, the majority of teens find this creepy. And I ask them, does it make it better or worse that they offered you money? And they almost always say worse. And I like that answer, but I play stupid and I'm like, why? And of course, they say, they're trying to buy you, or, if somebody gives you something, generally they want something in return, right? And so, this could be a manipulation or tactic or an act of coercion, right? Designed as being, I'm just trying to look out for you. I just want you to look good, baby. How about they tell you they want to spend more time together? Oh, that's so cute. But in order to do that, I'm afraid you're going to have to spend less time with your friends. All the teens, start screaming creepy. They tell you that they love you so much, that no one else on earth could ever love you more than I do. That my love just runs deep. Our souls have been intertwined in the space-time continuum since the Big Bang, and right? Most common answer I get is no, they're lying. Right? Mama loves me more. Occasionally I do get like Jesus loves me more. And then one girl in South Dallas said, I love myself the most. And I really like that answer and the way she said it. How about they want to hold hands with you all night at that party, right? Suddenly becomes creepy. So why would somebody want to hold hands with you all night at a party, right? And then they pick up on this. They understand why. It's like a leash, right? And so, there's a reason I ask those questions. And, sometimes kids pick up on it real quick. Sometimes they're like, I don't know. But I ask, is it abusive to want to sit next to my girlfriend every day at lunch? Is it abusive to tell my girlfriend that I love her the first week and that no one else could love her more than I do and want to hold her hand all night at the party? And of course, it's not abusive, technically, or is it? What is abuse, right? And so I think what's more important is to ask ourselves, what do all of these behaviors have in common? Right? The kids pick up on it. And they recognize that these are controlling behaviors, and the danger in this, and I think why it's so important to do this game with kids and talk to them about things like this, is these are the pink flags, right? They're not the red flags that are so easy to spot, like the bruise or the hole in the wall, right? Um, and more importantly, these can be justified by somebody who's abusive as expressions of love. And that is where most teens are at risk. Teens know the super abusive stuff, right? But it's that stuff in between. It's that transition period. It's those things that can lead to it, that they most often overlook, particularly the ones that can be disguised or framed as being expressions of love. So, abuse is about power and control. Abuse is not about love at all. And the two need to be separated, but it also has to be understood that they can exist at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive, right? So red flags and warning signs, I talk to the kids, the biggest warning sign is if things are too good to be true, right? He says all the right things, makes you feel so super special. Never met anyone who's understanding and as sensitive and as caring as he is. We know that most victims will report in the beginning of those relationships, a lot of times things were too good to be true, and that was a form of grooming. Um, Also teasing or criticizing, playing too rough. We kind of talked about this earlier. And then maybe coming back with a rejoinder, just kidding, or don't be such a wuss. Trying to make your partner feel guilty, or manipulating them into doing something. Maybe just giving them the cold shoulder or denying them affection, or punishing them for some transgression that they really did not make towards you. Any sort of possessive, controlling, protective behavior, acting like they own you. If you walk through the halls in high school, you'll see young men with their arms and elbows around their girlfriend's neck, just walking through the halls, corralling them. And some of the girls, it's kind of disturbing sometimes. I even had a teenage girl at one of the Garland high schools tell me that her boyfriend sometimes grabs her by her neck to tell her to come here, but that she's not worried about it. It's not abuse because he's not trying to make her pass out or choke her out. So, how kids interpret what's okay and what's not, or what's controlling and what's acceptable, needs to be determined by us, and by us explicitly telling them what is and what's not okay. Extreme jealousy, of course. Accusations of cheating is one of the most common forms. Where were you at? Who were you with? Why were you talking to him? Why are you friends with him on Facebook? I need to delete him right now. And then also a big red flag is explosive rage. Anger does not cause abuse, but abusive people are often angry, and most often because they're not getting that power and control that they so much desire. So oftentimes it comes out as screaming, punching holes in walls, driving too fast, recklessly to scare somebody, etc. Abuse, as we know, can take many different forms. It's not just that the physical violence, right? That's actually a really small part of the whole power and control mechanism that they use. I'm not going to go into this too much. If anyone does need any reading material or needs any help, you can shoot me an email later. So using words to control, hurt, embarrass, or scare. Manipulating someone's emotions in order to control them, scare, intimidate, humiliate, embarrass, etc. Using technology to control, manipulate. Using physical means, which also includes things like withholding medical care, or constantly waking somebody up and disturbing their sleep to hash out that argument again, so much so that they're not productive, or maybe somebody's so emotionally abusive about a partner's weight that partner is malnourished and starves themselves. Sexual abuse happens between partners a lot more often than people realize, particularly more in teens. And that's actually a whole nother webinar. I also have a webinar on sexting that I'm going to be doing coming up in the month if anyone's interested. So what I always try to talk to teens about is it's about how somebody makes you feel, right? If you feel controlled or it makes you feel creepy, then that is your boundary, that's your line. And you don't have to justify that to anybody. So it's really important that we not only talk to kids about what not to do. And so we don't want to be those people who wags our fingers at them and tells them don't, because I got that a lot when I was a kid. Don't smoke, you could get cancer. Don't drink and drive, you could kill yourself. Don't drive without a seatbelt. Don't do drugs. Don't have sex without a condom. But no one really sat me down and told me what to do. No one taught me how to have a healthy relationship, and this is what it looks like. And so it's really important that we try to empower them, not only with what to look out for in the red flags and how to avoid those abusive relationships, but in a positive direction, but actively and explicitly uh, encourage them to explore what kind of relationships do they want to have? What kind of qualities in a partner are important to them? How do they want to be treated? How do they want to treat somebody else? What's their bottom line? What's their, um, if somebody's crossed the line and it's time to break up. So I can't make somebody respect me, but I do have the choice to leave. Right? Somebody can throw that ball of abuse or disrespect at me, but I don't have to catch the ball. So we do need to talk to kids about setting boundaries. And, if we don't know what our boundaries are before we get into a sketchy situation, it's going to be a lot harder to determine if they've been crossed. And then once we finally do determine that, what are we going to do about it? Sometimes if we don't have that ahead of time, we may not act in the way that's most beneficial to us. So it's really important to have kids explore these. And there are some activities, and I do have some activities, and this is some of the activities that I've done with the kids with that Safe Dates program that I talked to you about, is having kids explore what's important to them, what are their values, and learning to understand that the less they know about themselves, if I only know half of who I am and I date someone who's abusive, that other person's going to define that. They're going to tell me who I am, right? And so, it's a big protective factor. So one of the things I like to do is have the kids write out what's important to you, your values. And so there are different aspects, of our lives that we can address. And so, if a college education is super important to you, and you get an opportunity to have a scholarship at an out-of-state university, but your current girlfriend is, maybe her dream is to live in Mississippi in a double wide trailer and have 15 kids, you probably want to examine whether or not that relationship is worth continuing, if indeed your true values and what's important to you is that college education. And so that's just one example about in a structured way, an explicit way, having kids think about what's important to them. It's really amazing when you put pen to paper how much more real and concrete something can become. It's also important, like we talked about, to know what we want, what kind of relationship we want. So we have the kids, we play a bingo game and have to find other people who want the same things in their partners. And then also the limits and the personal boundaries, and then what to do if they're crossed. So of course, the point of the Cute or Creepy game was to determine what are our boundaries there. If our boundaries have been crossed, then we have a choice. And often, though, in an extremely abusive or violent relationship, the choice to break up or leave can be the most dangerous choice they make. And so many times it's safer for them to stay. So we see I have about 10 minutes. So we did want to address some things that we might want to avoid saying. Sometimes we inadvertently might say something that may indicate or imply that the victim is somehow responsible for the abuse. And so, statements like these, they minimize abuse, and it also perpetuates abuse. Saying things like, well, boys will be boys, or hey, don't sweat it, everybody fights, everybody argues, or like, didn't he say he was sorry? Like, get over it. Or, not only, he seems like a nice guy to me, but he goes to my church. Or so we also don't want to use you too much. Maybe my friend or my teenage daughter tells me something about how she was abused in her dating relationship. And, if I say something like, "Oh, honey, like, how could you let this happen?" Right? Well, what I'm trying to express is, remorse and regret, and I'm here for her. But what I said was, "How could you let this happen?" So as if she gave permission, right? And so saying things like, "Oh, you're too smart to fall for that," um, implies that intelligence has anything to do with it when it doesn't. Well, what did you say that made him so mad, right? So the implication being that was whatever you said. So we need to avoid things like this. We also need to avoid giving bad advice like this or justifying the abuse. He's jealous because he loves you. Why don't you just leave? Just avoid him, right? This is extremely dangerous. So what about you? What can we do if someone in our life or coworker, family member, friend is abused? Quickly, that we recognize it, and that's kind of what the point of this webinar has been, to educate ourselves so that we can recognize it. Report it. Mandatory reporting laws in Texas says that an adult who is aware or suspects that a minor is being neglected or put into danger, they have, by law, they have to report it to law enforcement. And then ideally refer those victims to specialized services, and don't give advice ourselves, and don't blame them and ask them, well, why don't you just leave? The goal is always to empower the victim. We want to give the victim stuff because, of course, the whole nature of being a victim of abuse is not having power and control. So we want to give that to them by providing information. And it might be information in the form of a website, this webinar, or calling our hotline, or a brochure, hooking them up with resources, and letting them know about us, and then just being there for them while they do seek out that professional help. So somebody reaches out to you, it's always important that we believe them and we remain supportive, and we don't ask them why they stayed, or say things that might perpetuate the abuse or minimize it. I'm going to leave you, and I want to hear what you have to say. That's because I love you and care about you, and I'm worried about your safety. Physical and psychological isolation can be a very powerful tactic, and so it's really important that we maintain contact with someone. Um, Sometimes it may be easy to think, well, gosh, I keep helping them, and they keep going back, and so that I'm through with them, I'm not helping them anymore. When really it might have been too dangerous for them to reach out to you. And so if we break off that contact, what happens when they are ready to leave, or it is safe enough for them to leave? You won't be there. So we do need to maintain that contact. Let them know it's not okay. It's a crime to put your hands on someone. They don't deserve it. And of course, help is available in the form of law enforcement or the free services at Hope Store New Beginning Center. So there's our 24-hour hotline. I'm realizing that I'm coming up on the end of our time, and I think that's okay. I did not get to the few slides I had about working with teens, and ways and tools that we can build relationships with teens, and specific things that we can do to address teen dating violence as a prevention strategy in our homes. But I do have a whole nother webinar just on that I will want you guys to. But it's important to remember that, I can't force anyone and to leave their abusive partner. It's not my responsibility. So I'm not going to give advice, but I am going to give them love and support and information and referrals to those specialized resources like those that we provide here. So these are the things I'm not going to talk about because of that, but I did want to share with you guys a Facebook message I got from a former middle school student of mine. This young lady was a student of mine back in 2004. She was 12 years old at the time. I received this Facebook message last year from her. So whatever the math is on that, 15 years, 16 years later. She says, "You're one of the best teachers, of course. She loved science. You made school fun. And you made your classroom a safe place to talk to you about anything in life. I appreciate that a lot because sometimes that's all I needed," right? And, the joke is that, I spent hours and hours at home, planned lesson plans and making PowerPoints and those quizzes and those stupid reviews and blah, blah, blah. And the only thing you remember is that you felt safe. Wow, that's really powerful, right? And so it's really about making kids comfortable and building that trust and that relationship so that when they uh, do experience something in their life where they need to seek help, they're much more likely to do it. We've already laid that groundwork ahead of time and been that safe person for them. Lastly, I just want to share this thank you letter from a kid at Lake Highlands High School. He was going out with his girlfriend. She dumped him. He hated life. He started dating other people even though he didn't want to, and he felt really bad about himself. He just wanted that feeling of love again. And he says, as a result, I became a person I didn't want to be. Just made me feel sick and dirty. And then I walked in the class one day and he started to realize that his ex had actually been very abusive towards him. And he had been emotionally reliant on her. She was manipulative. And then, here at the end it says, I stopped being so stuck on her. So thankful you came in when you did. I stopped being so stuck on her. And the TED Talk at the end was just a cherry on top. After 4 long years of my life, feeling so terrible about one manipulative person, I finally feel like I can take the necessary steps to become content again. Right? I mean, that's huge, y'all. And this kid, you would never, and he didn't smile, you would have never known that anything was going on with him. And so it was torture, honestly, going into those classes because I felt like nobody cared, no one was interested, but I got a stack of thank you letters, things like this. And so the point is that we do have an effect on kids, and even if we can't see it, we are affecting them in a positive way. And we can have a huge impact just by talking with them about this and being frank, right? So Community Education Services, thank you guys so much for joining us. We do have some upcoming webinars. If you're here, you probably know about them already. You can also check us out on our webpage, learn about our education programs, and request a speaker in person even. Don't forget about our free resources, and also that we accept all members of our community. All humans are welcome, all genders, or even those who don't identify as a binary gender, including those in the LGBTQ community. Lastly, I'm going to put up my contact information. You can just call Hope Store New Beginning Center and ask for the bald tattooed guy, and they'll know who you're talking about. Your call will get to me. So does anyone have any questions in the chat? If not, feel free to reach out to me via phone, cell, or email. And thank you guys so much again for joining me today. I hope that was at least useful in your life and relevant. If not, at least now you know that there's a place that offers free help to victims of abuse in our community.